Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for a virtual fireside chat with me, CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. I'm Catherine Holt, and I'm joined today by a very special guest, the Victoria Chief of Police, Del Manak. Welcome, Del.
Thanks for having me on, Catherine.
This is a very important week for a lot of our members because they are trying to reopen their businesses, get customers back one way or the other. Many of them doing it in a very slow and considered and methodical way. And therefore, one of the big issues that keeps coming up is how safe is the downtown. We've heard lots of stories in the media about increases in the rate of break and enter, the homeless population, a lot of things that occupy your time and attention, Del. So we thought it would be a great opportunity to get your perspective on what's been happening over the last number of weeks as we've been going through this strange time. So just to start out, I'll be asking, just for our audience, I'll be asking the chief a number of questions that I have prepared, but please send in your questions by using the comment section on Facebook, and we'll do our best to get your questions answered by the chief as well. So let's start. Just give us your perspective on what this shutdown has been like for the police, Del. How would you characterize your job, your responsibilities during this period of time? How has it been?
Sure. So thanks, Catherine. So like for most of us, we didn't know what to expect. No one really knew how widely it was going to spread, how quickly the virus was going to spread through communities. So everyone did the best that they could with the information that we were given. And of course, that information changed every day as we started knowing more and more about what was happening in our region. For us, we luckily, we have an emergency plan. We were aware of it. We were able to dust it off quite quickly. The plan wasn't really dedicated to a pandemic per se, but a lot of the principles applied. So the good thing was we had our department operations center struck up quite early on before major changes were required to operations. And so we were quite easily able to pivot and transition our police operations quite quickly. Now, we had some challenges with making sure our officers had the proper personal protective equipment, commonly referred to as PPE. Now that was a challenge, but that was a challenge for everybody across the world. But what we were able to do was, I have two jobs. One is to be able to respond to people's need for emergency and to keep our community safe. And I have just as much of a responsibility to keep our frontline officers safe so that they're able to respond, stay healthy. So I actually have the resources to be able to deliver the much needed service. So it was drinking from a fire hose a little bit, there's no doubt about it. But the fact that we were aware that we needed to transition and had a plan in place that we're able to kind of refine as we went along certainly helped the situation, and it allowed us to deliver the much needed service to our communities.
Yes, and when I think about police work, I understand that you often have to physically engage with people to control violence on their behalf, or there's some kind of circumstance where they need actual physical support or contact. So that's an issue in this kind of environment. But as you reminded me also, the police deal with hazardous circumstances and all kinds of health risks that are present normally in our society. So you were, in your mind, maybe a little better trained and prepared for dealing with that than certainly the public, but many other service providers.
Yeah, so the police department, we deal with many people with communicable diseases, certainly not COVID, but you know that you have to take those necessary precautions, and you have to do what you can to keep the individual safe, to make sure that our officers aren't contracting that communicable disease or anything that might be hazardous. So we go into these type of situations or are accustomed to, and a lot of it's psychological. A lot of it is just having that psychological understanding of the role of the job, some of the occupational hazards of the job. So that certainly did help us. I can tell you that where possible, we really adapted quite quickly and asked our residents to phone and to make telephone calls to the police where we identified and let them know that we weren't going to be responding in the traditional way where we would send an officer face to face. So where possible, we were doing the best job that we could to not even actually go face to face with individuals complaining of a crime or a victim of a crime where that was possible. But like you pointed out, that's not possible in every situation. In police work, there is a requirement where we have to go hands-on and where we cannot maintain that physical distance. So in those type of instances, we just really had discussions with our staff about how to maintain their safety and also the safety of people around them, but yet how to get the job done. And part of it also, Catherine, was really our deployment model. We have officers that are deployed in two-person cars. We have officers that work alone in single-person units. And so we quite quickly made that decision that in order to slow the spread of the virus amongst our police officers, we were going to change our deployment and put all of the officers in one-person cars, again, for their own safety. So if the virus did start spreading within our organization, at least we could control and minimize what that impact would be.
So as you said, drinking from a fire hose, all of us feel like there was continuous change over the number of weeks when we were coping and dealing with this unknown spread, shutting things down. That must have had a big impact on community behavior and the type of things that you were dealing with, not necessarily, the PPE and the safety with regard to your own officers. Absolutely, you got that taken care of. But then behavior must have been changing. Do you have any on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we did know that, and we also know, we're subject matter experts in dealing with criminals, criminal behavior, and what's going to happen. And criminals are also quite savvy in adapting to the situation. And so as our businesses started to close, retail theft and fraudulent transactions that maybe were a way of committing crime for many people was no longer an option. So they started to adapt. They started focusing their criminal activities on construction sites, liquor stores, hardware stores, the retailers that stayed open during the pandemic for all the valid reasons. So we were aware that there was going to be a shift. And I think what we really did well, and again, we're going to debrief this all afterwards, look at lessons learned and how we can be better and more responsive to our communities. But we were luckily able to adjust quite quickly into assessing the crime trends. In fact, at the peak of the pandemic, the Victoria Police Department, from our crime analysts, were receiving intel bulletins twice a week because we wanted to increase the frequency so we could respond much more quickly. And then obviously, we were concerned about commercial break and enters, which did spike considerably despite our efforts. But we really worked with the Downtown Victoria Business Association and Jeff Bray and his team, and really worked with the business community and making sure that businesses weren't going to just be an open target and vulnerable for prolific property offenders. So we asked people to remove their valuables from their storefronts. We asked them to paper their walls. We asked them to monitor their unoccupied businesses more frequently in case—
Paper their windows.
Pardon me?
Paper their windows, I think you mean.
Exactly. But taking all of those proactive steps, I'll tell you, even Wednesday, just like 2 days ago, our officers were actually on foot going door to door and checking businesses. And we actually found a downtown restaurant, that business, the door was insecure. And so luckily a break-in hadn't occurred, but we were able to notify the property reference to come lock the door. So we've continued to do that. And the other thing, Catherine, is there's two ways to kind of tackle the whole downtown business and supporting them. One is doing a visible, proactive way, which is a lot of uniform presence to let people know and the criminals know that the police haven't abandoned their duties. We're actually out in the community. And then the second is to actually have officers working in plain clothes and to then go undercover and to target those that are actively casing out businesses looking to do smash and grabs and whatnot. So we kind of had a hybrid approach and a multi-pronged approach in how we were going to deal with these prolific property offenders.
Mm-hmm. So sometimes when business owners said they hadn't seen the police, they might have been looking right at them, but they were in plain clothes. They weren't necessarily trying to be high profile. Combination.
Yeah, absolutely. And just one last thing, Catherine, I wanted to just touch on is one of the things that we talk to our officers about is, there was, and there still continues to be, some level of stress and anxiety and concern over what's happening and what changes everyone's having to go through. Because again, there's no map for this. We're all trying to learn. But in the early stages, we talked to our officers and we told them that their visibility out on the streets in the community, we felt strongly offered the community a sense of encouragement, comfort, and hope. And we really wanted to make sure that the public kind of knew that the police were out there. And by the way, our call volume, if compared to 2019, now this is from January till kind of the middle of April, to the latest stats that I had, actually increased during COVID when compared to 2019. So our workload didn't go down because of COVID.
Yeah, so even though everyone was staying home, that almost is a perfect environment for more opportunity, as you're saying, for the people who want to take advantage of it. So that increases calls. But you probably, if we move our focus a little broader from safety of downtown businesses, you've got to deal with the safety of the entire community in multiple ways. So there must have been other increases in other types of calls to the police that weren't related to physical premises downtown.
Yeah, absolutely. So calls for mental wellness, so mental health calls, where again, people are experiencing high levels of stress, anxiety. People find themselves without a job, even though the government's done a really good job of providing some supplemental income and whatnot. But that creates stress and anxiety for people. So we really had more calls to check people's welfare, check on, make sure that they're healthy, make sure that if they need to be taken to the hospital. So we had more kind of mental health related calls. Domestic disputes went up 20%. Where,
wow.
Well, I mean, it's significant because now you've got people trapped in relationships that are not healthy. And now they can't leave because everyone's in self-isolation, or at least is kind of in a semi-lockdown, and restaurants aren't open. People can't engage with their friends. That could be their only support network. And so that led to more calls for the police, just even on domestics. And our property crime really did go through the roof for a period of time. This last week, I'm proud to report, has seen the lowest in 13 weeks in theft from autos and bike thefts and whatnot. But prior to that, we had significant increases in property crime.
So that speaks to the other thing that keeps downtown safe, which is people being downtown. So customers, business owners, office workers, tourists would be nice. We're not going to have those, but we need the downtown to operate normally. That is a big way to contribute to the general safety of the downtown. So I'm assuming that the reason you're seeing those property crimes go down is because we're starting to see people come back and do their normal business downtown.
Yeah, and you asked me a question earlier about, is downtown safe? Absolutely. I can tell you I'm downtown regularly, even during the shutdown and the businesses being closed. We have a great downtown. I'm born and raised in this city. I've seen the transition of the city of Victoria. We have a great downtown. It's vibrant. Yes, all the restaurants won't be open to 100% capacity. Many places still are restricted in their opening. But however, I really would encourage people to, as long as you're following the provincial health officers' guidelines and you're trying to maintain, and you are maintaining that physical distance. But everyone wants to kind of get out a little bit, and I think it's just important for our psyche to be out and about again and have some normalcy in our lives again. And so I would encourage people where they can to actually support our local businesses and to go out and again wear a mask where you can't maintain those distance, follow the guidelines, which I think are quite reasonable, and we want to do what we can, but that certainly means that we can go to phase 2 and we can start kind of spreading out a little bit and not just sticking to our home. And I would encourage people to come downtown.
Great. And that'll help businesses for sure. So another big responsibility, another thing that took an enormous, I'm assuming has taken an enormous amount of your time, is what we've seen with regard to the efforts to get our street population into housing so that the COVID risk is minimized among that population. And also, I think the other consideration is that we are trying to, we have a chronic problem. It's not just related to COVID with regard to hundreds of people on the street. And if we're trying to get downtown back to normal, we do need help managing that problem. So what has been your involvement with regard to that issue, and how much of your resources has that taken?
Sure. It's taken a lot of resources. We are in a support capacity. The city's done a really good job. These are challenging, complex challenges to fix. There's no easy answer. I can tell you that we've been at the table with all of the service providers, with different levels of government, with the city, with bylaw, fire department, including BC Housing, Island Health, and service providers. And it's been challenging, and I know that there's been lots of talk about how it's been handled, but I can tell you firsthand, and I've been up at both the Pandora corridor and also the Topaz site multiple times every week for the last 10 or 12 weeks, and I've seen the camps grow, and certainly I've now seen them being decamped as people have been found, housing has been found for them. But this is a really, really challenging population. Many people have many complex needs that require wraparound services and individual care. And it's not easy to provide, because you might find a location for individuals to move them into hotels, or BC Housing goes out and purchases property, which I think is excellent to see. But you need to support these people with services as well. And there's a lot of people with severe and persistent mental illness, with drug addiction, that we're trying to support. So we're doing what we can. Now, as we've decamped Topaz and we're almost finishing the Pandora corridor, the concern then is around other parks. And what does it look like? You talked about downtown. Certainly we're working with the city, and we're working with our bylaw officers and coming up with a plan, an incremental plan. We have to remember, we're still in a public health emergency. So as much as we're going to phase 2, we want to make sure that this population is supported and they have the necessary care. So we're probably not moving fast enough for my liking, or even the liking of some of the listeners. But like I say, there are many barriers and many challenges that we're all trying to come together. But I know our heart's in the right place, and I'm hoping that we are able to provide the necessary supports for this population.
Yeah, and one of the things that seems obvious to me is that once BC Housing, and I know that the city, the mayor, and you, as you say, have been working at a common table with other service providers, Island Health, BC Housing, for example, being two major players. Once they do actually buy these new premises and move people into them, there's not going to become a point where they say, okay, let's shut down the Comfort Inn and kick everyone back out on the street. That's going to become a permanent use for that property, I would say. And that goes to your point that it's not just about a roof for these people. That's not the problem. Right. So still looking for how those facilities function and become a functional part of those neighborhoods instead of just a disaster.
Right. And again, even amongst that population, Catherine, it's really important to note that there's different variables within each individuals and each groups of individuals. Not any one or two individuals are the same. They all have different backgrounds, and they all require kind of individualized services and supports in place. So that actually even makes it more challenging. The biggest issue that I see is actually hiring and having enough experienced staff, whether it's services, whether it's health, any other support services that are needed, and being able to kind of provide those services to individuals to make sure that they're provided with the necessary care. And I think that, you can find all of the housing, and I know that it isn't just to move them into temporary housing. The goal is eventually to get more permanent housing, but we can only move as fast as the system allows us to move, and as fast as we're able to acquire the space and actually train people, hire them, and to be able to provide some of these services. So we're trying to move some mountains here, and we're trying to move them as quickly as we can. But I've certainly seen firsthand that it's not as easy as some people think it is.
Oh God, yes. One of my sayings when I was a management consultant is never waste a good crisis. And I think this is an example of this crisis having some beneficial effects with regard to focusing on things like the health and the public health risk of the street population. So to the extent that it has forced these investments in new facilities for them to live in, good. But are you hopeful that we actually will be able to get to the point where we have the type of support that they will become reasonably managed populations in those places?
Well, I mean, I'm hopeful. I'm always a positive person, but I think there's lots of work to be done, and I think there's a recognition amongst everyone at the table that we are nowhere near done. That these are just small incremental steps. But I think again, it really would be nice if all the municipalities were equal players in this and spread it out a little bit. I'm seeing a lot of heavy lifting being done by the city of Victoria, which I think is excellent and commendable to see, but it really would be nice. We are a large region. We have a lot of resources and services we can offer. And a dispersed model provides a little bit more kind of elasticity to allowing us to be able to kind of support this this population in a good way. So, you know, I'd like to see probably more of that, and a bit of the sharing, I think, instead of the city doing all the heavy lifting.
Yeah, because it just gets more and more concentrated and more, uh, dynamics going on among that population. The more of them are concentrated in one area, and so they themselves do a lot better if they're not concentrated, and certainly our municipalities all do better if there's a downtown that functions for everybody. So yes, absolutely, well said, that we need the help of other municipalities to provide facilities. Anything the public can do to help?
No, I think you know, we just have to be understanding, and I know that our communities are caring, they're compassionate, and they do understand. But like I say, one of the things that the public needs to, it's a lot of it is just awareness, needs to know is that there are people that are quite vulnerable. There's people that are quite sick and that need help that they can't help themselves, and we're doing the best we can. One thing I think the public just needs to realize is there is the criminal element that prey on our most vulnerable. And those are the people that the police are targeting. And those are the people where I have very little sympathy on, because they're preying on our most marginalized and vulnerable individuals. And certainly we know who they are. They may not look any different to members of the public as they drive by or interact or see people on the streets. But we have a zero tolerance for those who are preying on our most vulnerable, taking advantage of them. We're going to do what we can to keep all of our community safe, which includes the people that are experiencing homelessness.
Well said. What do you see ahead for you, the police department, for our community, as we continue to face more months of let's say, getting back to a better sense of normal, but still, as you say, in this public health crisis? What do you see in the months ahead for you?
So for the police department is just really supporting our community. I mean, I know that to maintain the trust and the respect of our communities, we have to be responsive to their needs, and those needs and the priorities that they feel the police should be taking on change, and they adapt, and they will continue to adapt as we come out of COVID and move further on, and hopefully we continue to relax some of these guidelines as our communities get healthier. So from a police perspective, I want to see, you know, business returning slowly, again, guided by our provincial health officer, to as normal as it can be. Not sure if it'll be an exact normal to what it was in pre-COVID, but to also, again, start engaging more with our communities. I'm looking at restarting Project Downtown Connect, which we did for 5 weeks, which was very well received by our business community. And I think it's important to kind of start that up when the time is right, and then when our businesses are kind of back again, because again, I want to finish off that 4-month project. It was 4-month thing. Again, I had to put it on hold after 5 weeks. But we want to just continue to stay engaged and continue to support our communities. We have a tremendous following on social media. So any updates that we have, we continue to provide and interact with our citizens, so that we make sure that we're kind of our fingers on the pulse as to what the needs of the community are, so we can be nimble and adjust and adapt to what their needs are.
Yeah, I myself, so your Project Connect was a couple of police officers actually going down the main business area of downtown and interacting with business owners coming into their stores when, you know, they were, I'm sure, greeted with open doors, and we certainly had them visit us here at the chamber, which was fantastic. And, you know, they just did a quick look around, safety issues, got to know what the premises looked like for their own information, had a great chat, hit a personal note with them, and it was a great connection. So I can absolutely tell you that I heard a lot about it, very positive things. And I think that is what our businesses are looking for, is more. They're always talking about presence matters, so having that personal connection really seemed to have an impact with them. So please do resume that as soon as you possibly can. So I'm just going to finish on a final note, which is you have been noted for fighting the good fight with, if fight is not too strong a word, discussion with the Victoria and Esquimalt Mayor and Council year after year to get the budget you feel you need to achieve the things that we've been talking about today. Now you've got possible higher ongoing demands for help from people, and a changing landscape, and trying to get the downtown back to normal. Seems like more work, not less to me. What does that mean for your budget, and how are you feeling about your resources?
Sure. So, I mean, that's an ongoing discussion that we have. I mean, I give a lot of credit. Catherine, you served on our police board years ago. So the role of the police board when it comes to setting the budget and setting the priorities for the organization. We've got a new strategic plan. We literally just rolled out 2 or 3 months ago. Unfortunately, didn't get much play because COVID kind of was taking over the headlines. But in line with our strategic plan, we'll be working with our board to assess, as we do every year, in the next 2 or 3 months, about what our budgets will look like, what are some of the pressures that we have. But also, I think we want to be realistic as well, recognizing that the municipalities have not generated the revenue that they would have, and that COVID has also had an impact on them. In fact, the city of Victoria decided to keep the increase to 0% for taxes and whatnot. So that is going to have a significant impact on the city's ability to fund all services, not just the police department. So we want to, again, I want to be realistic in the climate that we're in. We do have pressures, but I want to make sure that we're also looking at internal efficiencies and working within, I think, the framework of maybe even what this looks like post-COVID. But those are discussions I'll be having with the police board. And again, I'm hopeful. I'm very grateful that our communities, business community, and our citizens really recognize the role of the police, our expanded role, the complex nature of policing, and the investigative steps that we now have to take. So that's really encouraging to see. And I know that, that strong voice gets to council, and they do recognize that policing is one of their core responsibilities, and they have to support it. But again, I'll be going to the board, and we'll be having those discussions in the months ahead.
Okay. Good luck with that. And you're right, we're all in a less well-funded world going forward. So we appreciate your services, and thank you for your time in your busy day, and carry on.
Perfect. Excellent. Thanks for having me on, Catherine. Thank you.
Thanks, Al.